Africa, the most uncovered continent in all of Google Street View, which makes it one of the easiest to learn, and many beginners learn this continent first. So today I'm going to give you some clues for every country so you can help recognize them. And in turn, this should definitely elevate your game in both OpenGuessr and GeoGuessr. So let's begin. Now, as I just alluded to, Africa has very limited coverage. Take a look at the blue lines in this continent, and you'll notice it's not in a lot of countries. And in a lot of countries that it is in, the coverage is fairly limited, and we will get into that. And here is our color-coded map. All the countries in gray have no coverage at all, which means you should not be guessing those countries. The countries in red we are going to get into in this video. Madagascar is the only country in dark pink because it is a trekker-only country, but there is a lot of trekker that is found in this country, much more than the other ones in light pink. And these light pink countries have only a few trekker locations to the point where they are extremely rare to find in game. And we also talked about Egypt in the Middle Eastern video, so we won't discuss that in this one. So in Africa, we basically have 4 main regions. By far, the most developed region is going to be Southern Africa, which consists of 5 different countries. Now over here is Reunion Island that we will talk about in this video as well. This is kind of all off on its own, and many beginners forget that this is even in the game. Now here we have our East Africa region. Now Kenya is going to be by far the most prevalent country you will see in this region. Uganda has a little bit of coverage, and so does Rwanda. So these are the big 3 over in East Africa. Now we also have Western Africa here, starting off with Nigeria, which is the biggest country in this region. We also have Ghana and of course Senegal. And now you'll notice that there is really no coverage at all in North Africa. Here the Saharan Desert is absolutely nothing except for Tunisia, which does have coverage, limited coverage, and we'll talk about that once we get into this country. But over here in Morocco, there is no coverage, but there are some enclaves, some territories of Spain that do have coverage. Here's one in Ceuta, and there's also one over somewhere over here. Yes, okay, over here in Melilla. So there you go. I won't talk about these territories too much because they do have a lot in common with Spain, but they are on the African continent. So these places do exist. So here we are in Tunisia, and as I said earlier, it does have limited coverage. Take a look at the blue line. It really almost only hugs the east coast. If I take away all this labels here, you can see exactly where the blue lines are. There are some random blue dots out over in the western and central part of Tunisia. These are just random trekkers that you probably won't see too often, so I won't be concerned with them too much. Now, the coverage, unfortunately, in Tunisia is a little bit outdated, and I do not believe that there is any signs from Google to replace it. So the coverage is in generation 3, meaning it looks a little bit old. It doesn't look terrible. It actually still looks good, but it's definitely not the best generation 4 that it can have. This is a very common sight you will see in Tunisia. First of all, the red and white curbs are very common throughout the country, and these signs are just classic. You will see the signs all over the place. It's this white sort of chevron with this black ending, and you will almost always see Arabic and Latin letters on the signs as well. So they are bilingual. Now, Tunisia is one of a couple countries in Africa that has a follow car, meaning that there is a car following the Google car almost at all times in this country. Here is one of them. This is a green Toyota, which is following the Google car in the north part of Tunisia. So that's kind of a region guessing skill as well. The light green Toyota is going to be found in the north part of Tunisia. You'll notice while playing the game, hey, why is this car always behind me in Tunisia? Well, it's a follow car, and you'll see that quite often in the country. But this vehicle right here is gonna be much more common to see. This is by far the most common follow car in Tunisia. It is a dark green Mazda, and you can tell it is this because of the license plate, which I believe is only found on military or government vehicles in Tunisia. It has this black with the red on the left, and if you see this vehicle, there's a very, very high chance you're going to be in Tunisia, pretty much anywhere except for the north. Now, although Tunisia is a Mediterranean country, it seems to be a bit drier than others, especially the more south you go. But even in the northernmost part of Tunisia, it's definitely not overly lush anywhere, and these olive trees are a great clue for Tunisia. These seem to be all over the place in the country. Although Arabic seems to be the dominant language spoken in Tunisia, you will see a ton of French as well. This is definitely a bilingual country, and you will see most of it in Arabic, but of course you will see quite a few French words as well, which there are only one other French-speaking country in Africa that is included in the game of OpenGuessr and GeoGuessr they have to worry about. So that definitely helps narrow down a lot of Africa. And that's going to take care of the entire North African region already. I know there's really not much. as I did state earlier, Egypt was included in the Middle Eastern video, so go take a look at that if you haven't already. But now let's go to the other French-speaking country other than Tunisia in Africa. And that's going to be Senegal. Senegal is a very French country. That is the language that you will see by far the most. In fact, you might only see French when you're in Senegal. And if you watch the European guide, then you know all about French poles. And here in Senegal, they use them too. You can see over there, they have that lat pull down bar as well on top. These are very common all throughout Senegal. Now, I wouldn't say these are super common, but the French bollard is also used here in Senegal. So yeah, lots of French art infrastructure, including the outer road lines, which are white, and they're about the same width and size as the French ones as well. So there is just so much French going on here in Senegal. Now, in recent history, there have been a decent amount of updates here in Senegal, most of which is now taken with one of these white trucks. There are a few other colors than it can be, but all of it typically is going to be some sort of colored truck just like this one. And here's the original coverage that was taken in Senegal. It has pretty much all been overwritten, but you might see from time to time it does have a roof rack here that you can visibly see. But the most important part is going to be the rifts in the sky. Yes, I believe Senegal might be one of the OG places that has had rifts in the sky. Other places like Albania and Montenegro also have this, but in Africa, typically, Senegal would be the only place that you will see rifts, but again, it is in the old coverage that is very rarely seen. And yes, the car might be blurred out from time to time like this, but you should see a massive blur. That is a sign that you are in very large truck coverage like this one here. Either way, the landscape in Senegal is very, very dry and kind of empty. There are areas like this that are super lush. Most of this, I would say like 90% of this, will be found south of the Gambia. And you can see that on the map that south of the Gambia, you will have a lot of green coloring on the Google map. And up here, you'll have a lot of tan and brown. It kind of works that way as far as the vegetation goes in the rounds as well. Okay, next up we have Ghana, which is a country that, again, has limited coverage. You can see that there's only a few long blue lines on some of the main highways. And there are some of the main cities like Accra, for example, does have some fairly dense coverage, and same up here in Kumasi. But for the most part, it's just kind of main roads. Now, Ghana is home to perhaps the most iconic tip in all of Google Street View history, and that is going to be the famous Ghana black tape. Here it is right here on the front right of the roof rack, and I do say front right because it has to be the front right. This is the only car that you will see in Ghana right now. Now, this will be an outdated tip because eventually Ghana will get updated coverage. I'm not sure when that is coming out, but it has been confirmed by Google that new coverage will be replacing the Ghana black tape, which is a sad thing because it's so iconic. Now, there is one other country we will talk about in this video that does have black tape on their roof rack as well, but it's in a different spot. So just note that Ghana is going to be in the black tape. That's really all you need to get Ghana, honestly. If you're playing no moving or moving, then you should just be able to see that and say, oh, I'm in Ghana. Now, if you just forget to look down or you're playing NMPZ or something, there are a few other tips I can give you to help you guess Ghana. First of all, commercial vehicles are going to have yellow license plates. So this is not unique to Ghana. Many countries will have this, but just note that like taxis, for example, will have yellow license plates, but the regular vehicles will just have basic white ones. Also, if you look at the signs, English is the common language spoken here in Ghana. Ghana typically has a lot of sandy roads, or at least there is some dirt on the side of the roads that appear to be somewhat orange or even red at some parts. This is a pretty common trend throughout the entire country. Although as you go more north in the country, the landscape tends to get a lot drier and the dirt tends to get a lot oranger. So just keep that in mind. This is what kind of the north part of Ghana can look like. And this is what the far south looks like. A lot of palm trees, a lot of tropicalness happening here, and a lot of just greens. So these are the kind of the two extremes of the country. If you're looking at something that seems to be kind of in the middle of this, then click in the middle. However, Ghana really is an easy country to get thanks to the beautiful black tape. That's all you really need to know to guess this country. Now, next up, we have Nigeria, which is a country that has a fair share amount of coverage and is still getting coverage to this day. Now, unfortunately, most of that coverage is being used with a bad cam, which you guys know my feelings on this type of camera being used. I don't like it, and I don't think many people do at all. Nigeria is a country that is capable of using cameras that are not the good old bad cam. Like here we have a good old truck cam, kind of like Senegal over there, right? This one is red in particular. Now I'm about to turn around, guys, don't get jump scared, but there's a whole bunch of police cars following me. Are we in trouble? No, this is what happens in Nigeria. Just like Tunisia, Nigeria is a country that has a follow car, but the follow car is almost always going to be a police vehicle. You can tell because of the light on top there, red and blue. So that is a great sign you are Nigeria. If you turn around and see a bunch of cop cars following you, sometimes there's one, sometimes there's 5. You know, you never really know how many you're going to see. This time it looks like we have 2. And so that is a fantastic clue for Nigeria. Now, just like in Ghana, Nigeria also does use a lot of English. That is the main language spoken here in Nigeria. If you're in an urban area, it's likely you'll see some license plates. And these license plates have a green tint to them. You can see it here. You can see it there. You can see it over there. There's usually a green tint in the middle of the license plate in Nigeria. That's a pretty good clue as well. So if you see the police car behind you that looks like that and some green license plates, you know exactly what country to click in. Now, I would be remiss if I did not mention Mali because it does have a slight amount of coverage. There's a few trekkers in Mali. Notice how there's no official Google Street View on the roads at least. But if you head down here into Bamako, there is one little dot over here that you can go to, and there's a few others as well. For example, over in Timbuktu. Where is it? There it is, Timbuktu. There's a few different trekkers out and about over here. So go poke around and explore that on Google Street View. It is kind of cool to look around. Chances you're going to see Mali in game very slim, but I just wanted to mention it. Now we have one more country in this region that I really don't want to mention, guys. I really don't, but I feel like I have to for the sake of being complete. We have Sao Tome and Principe, which is a country here. It's an island nation, and it does have some coverage on both islands. As you can see here, there are some blue lines on both islands here, but this is known to be the worst coverage in the entire game. This is supposed to be a beautiful island. Look at these palm trees. But look at what we're stuck with the Google coverage. This is just horrendous, guys. It really is. They try to improve the blur a little bit. The blur used to almost take over the entire screen, and I'm sure I can find some examples of that. But here in Sao Tome and Principe, the coverage is just so bad. Here's a pretty good example of what we were dealing with here in Sao Tome and Principe. This is just what we're dealing with in this country. And to be honest, I have no tips for you because I don't even know any tips myself for this country other than just this terrible coverage. I see this and I click the country and you get it correct. You know, it's kind of just that simple. The coverage is bad, even worse than Nigeria in most spots. And yeah, I mean, look at this, guys. Look. Imagine you get NMPZ looking this way. What are we doing here, Google? And that will conclude this western part of Africa. We're now going to head over to the eastern part. But before that, we have to share one tip that I think is extremely helpful for this continent. And that's going to be driving direction. You can see 2 colors here, red and blue. The countries in red are the ones who drive on the right side of the road. Notice how all of them that we talked about so far have driven on the right side of the road. And with the exception of Rwanda and Reunion Island all the way over there, all the other countries we will be talking about in the future here will be driving on the left. So you can easily break it up based on the region, what side of the road they drive on. And now we're going to go to Rwanda, which, as you can immediately see, is another one of those big truck countries. It has a few different colors. White is fairly common, but there's a brown, and I believe there's also a black here in this country. So a few different colors, but Rwanda is a very hilly country. There is pretty much no flat areas at all in Rwanda, and the soil is also very dark. Also, take a look. Banana plants. Extremely common as well in this country. All of these things is what you will see in a typical landscape round in Rwanda. And if you're in an urban area, you don't see all of that stuff, don't fret, because there are a few clues here. First of all, the black and white curbs are pretty much everywhere in the major cities, especially in Kigali, the capital city. You will see that quite a bit. Also, take a look at the people on motorcycles. You'll notice that they wear a red helmet and a red vest. They are required by law to do so. So kind of look at all of this. Some of them have different colors, but they have to wear a helmet and a vest if you are driving a motorcycle in this country. So everyone does that. Good law-abiding citizens. But really the best clue is going to be that Rwanda does drive on the right side of the road, because this is a country that you will probably get confused a lot with Kenya, which does drive on the left. So if you see this location, you should know that you are going to be in Rwanda rather than Kenya, just because of the driving direction. All right, and here we are back in Kenya, which does have a lot of the same landscape clues as Rwanda. Typically, the more west you go, the closer it looks like Rwanda. But here we have another big truck country. There are a few other vehicles that you might see in Kenya in more rare occasions, but definitely the big truck is the most common you will see. And of course, driving on the left here, sometimes in Kenya it might be tough to see exactly what side of the road you're on, especially if you're on more of a rural location in the dirt. But here you can kind of see we're on the left. Now, one of the first clues that beginners learn about Kenya that I probably should have started out with is going to be the snorkel, which is seen here in the front. This is so if it's in a flooded area, the engine can still get some air. This is very common in a lot of different vehicles in Kenya. Not every single vehicle will have this though. So just because you don't see a snorkel does not mean that you are not in Kenya, right? So you could still be there, but it is common on a lot of the vehicles. If you remember correctly from last week's video on Eastern Asia, Mongolia is another one of those countries that uses this snorkel sometimes. But of course, Mongolia and Kenya look very, very different. Now, if you're in any sort of urban area or areas that have some buildings, you're likely to see an advertisement or a building for Safaricom, which is a company that's only located in Kenya. And for some reason, their name is just all over the place. So if you see that, great clue, you're in Kenya. Now we have the final country in this region. That's going to be Uganda. And I saved this for last because look at the blue lines. There's really not much. The only street view coverage that you really should be concerned about is going to be in Kampala here in the capital city. Notice how there's a lot of blue lines, but there are some others in national parks that do actually have a car that drove around. So some of this is not actually Trekker coverage. It is actually a Google car. So we'll get into that now. So the first thing here is going to be this Google car, which is going to be white. You will be able to see the mirrors. You'll see the front of it. This is a Generation 3 vehicle that is unique to Kampala and kind of the surrounding areas. Because it's only in those areas, you will only usually see this vehicle in very urban areas. There should be some buildings around. It would be a very rare location to find this vehicle on some sort of off-road that has no buildings on it at all. So if you see this vehicle right here, great sign you're in Kampala. That's really all you need to know, to be honest with you. Now, all the national park coverage does not use this vehicle. Instead, it uses a vehicle that kind of has this black bar in the front. So if you see that, you could be in a Uganda National Park, although that is something that is used in other parts of the world. I have seen it in a couple of other countries in very rare occasions. Okay, Uganda definitely going to be the most commonly used black bar front vehicle. There is a couple of instances where you might see this on an actual like road. Of course, this is still a dirt road, but it's a proper road. And so since this is the beginner's guide, I just wanted to mention it. We're not going to go into full detail. This is definitely more of an advanced tip. I want to just give a quick shout out to Tanzania here, who is a country that's just like Mali. It has a little bit of checkered coverage, most specifically right here near Mount Kilimanjaro, where if you remember, Rainbow actually climbed up there, but the trekker is not of him. And there also is some trekker over here by this lake on the coast. So there's a little bit in Tanzania. Very, very rare to see this country. And that's going to conclude this Eastern African portion. And we're now going to head down to the Southern Africa, which can be the most challenging, I would say. But first, we're gonna head over here to Reunion Island. This is a pretty small island that's actually owned by France. So yes, you will see quite a bit of French here, including French infrastructure and like these signs right here, the D11. We have these yellow D roads even over here in Reunion Island, which is fantastic. But the thing that you can guess this island very, very easily is going to be the Google car. As if you could look down, it does have a roof rack and it has black tape. Yes, that is correct. But this time it's not in the front right. It's actually over here in the back right. So the black tape is going to help you out when determining which place to go. Is it Ghana or is it Reunion Island? It depends. Is it in the front or is it in the back? Here in Reunion Island, it is the back. And that's really all you have to know to guess this island. Right next door is Madagascar, which is just like Mali. It has very limited coverage, but there is a little bit more than Mali. There's quite a bit more, actually. There's a handful of trekkers along the coastline. There's a few in the capital city of Antananarivo, right over here by the Queen's Palace, which is probably the most common one that you will see. There's a handful of boat trekkers along the coast, but again, this is simply a country that you won't see very often. So now let's turn our attention to the final area that you will see quite often in the game of OpenGuessr, and that is going to be this Southern African region, which every single one of these countries that has blue lines here is going to have a lot of coverage in the country. Namibia was just released this year in 2025, so we are looking good in this area at least. Again, all of these countries now that we will talk about for the remainder of this video do drive on the left side of the road. You can see that truck over there on the left. And all of these countries will have a lot of very similar clues, which makes it sometimes hard to tell apart. First of all, yellow outer road lines like this is going to be super common in all the rest of these 5 countries, including here in Namibia. Here in Namibia, you will see a truck. This one, unfortunately, is blurred, so I can't really show you, but you will usually see an antenna even if it is blurred. And here you can see the truck. It is going to be white. Namibia is a very dry and fairly flat country. Of course, there are some random hills here or there, but for the most part, it is a pretty not dense country at all. Even in the far northeast of the country, it is still pretty dry. You can see a ton of sand here, but there are some trees here. We start to see some green trees as you go further north. However, still very dry. There are some areas of Namibia that look like this that are just completely desert. They're honestly kind of cool to look at. Namibia and South Africa use a lot of the same signage as well. These green signs with this white border usually have the name of the road here and the closest place to it. These are super helpful when trying to pinpoint, trying to 5K. This is essentially a very easy 5K at this intersection with this sign here. So now we can turn over here to South Africa, and yeah, they have very similar signs, so be careful. But in South Africa, you won't see that big white truck for the most part. There's a few different vehicles that you will see. You saw that one blur right there. You saw that blur. They also have Generation 2, which is the only country in this area that has Generation 2. In fact, I can say that South Africa is the only country in all of Africa to have Generation 2. And if you don't know what that is, it is this large circle on top. This was typically taken in the early 2010s or late 2000s. You will see Generation 2. So this large circular blur, if you are in Africa, is only found in the country of South Africa. The same thing goes with this Generation 4 vehicle, which is only found in South Africa when in Africa as well. Namibia does have Gen 4, of course, so does Kenya, so does Nigeria, so does Senegal, but they won't have this car. They will have those trucks, as we talked about earlier. So blue car with an antenna is very common in South Africa. Of course, driving on the left with these yellow outer road lines, always common. South Africa also has a pretty extensive coastline with a lot of roads actually looking at the coast. Most of it is going to be on a southern angle, but you could see some on the west coast as well, near Cape Town, like we are near right now with these mountains. So the landscapes of South Africa is very diverse. You can get some coastal stuff like we just saw, or some very dry desert locations like this. You can also see stuff like this, which is kind of a mixture with some pretty dark orange dirt. Now the final 3 countries, Botswana, Eswatini, and Lesotho, all have pretty old coverage that has not been updated recently. So they all are in Generation 3 coverage. Now these countries will always be using a white back of the car, so you should have that visible. Sometimes it might be hidden by the blur from time to time, but you will also see very typical clues such as the yellow outer road lines and driving on the left, which makes it kind of hard sometimes to tell the difference between Botswana and Eswatini. Especially here we have some Botswana poles that are black and yellow alternating. This is a great clue that's only found in Botswana for the most part, and typically they are found closer to the capital city of Gaborone. This is kind of what Botswana looks like. The landscape is very flat. There are very few hills. If you do see them, it's likely to be south near the South African border, but Botswana otherwise is fairly flat. You might see some shrubbery on the sides of the roads. The soil here can be kind of whitish at times, but it also may be a bit of a darker color too, depending on where you are, of course, in the country. Botswana also likes to use these green road signs with the actual road name on here. It is helpful to kind of learn some of the big cities in Botswana, such as Francistown here, because you will see that word on a lot of signs, and you really won't see that, of course, in South Africa. So if you do see that word, you should be in Botswana. Now we'll talk about Eswatini next, but a difference that I can tell you right now is that Botswana likes to use yellow back license plates, which is only one of 2 countries in southern Africa that uses it. The other one being Namibia, which I did not mention, but Botswana and Namibia, right next door to each other, are the only ones that typically use back yellow license plates. Now here we are in Eswatini, which yes, you do see that white car as well as the yellow outer road line. So that is the same in Botswana. The one thing that is different though, of course, is going to be the hilliness. Eswatini is a fairly mountainous country. The mountains are not huge, but there are plenty that you should be able to see pretty much everywhere you are in the country. Now, if you're in an urban area here in Eswatini, the license plates can be quite helpful. Look at these. There are a very unique color of like green and yellow. These are very unique license plates I don't believe you'll see anywhere else in the world. But again, same street signs as every other Southern African country, it would appear, which makes it again quite difficult to figure out based on that. But at least all of these signs make it easy for 5K'ing and pinpointing, which is helpful. Now, I have to mention probably the most iconic tip of all time for Eswatini, and that is the famous Eswatini grass, which you can see pretty much all over the country. It is this long grass that is growing on the sides of the roads. You can pretty much see this thing every single time you are in Eswatini. Now we have our final country of Africa, which is Lesotho. Yes, it is pronounced that way, but this is a country that I usually don't get confused with others just because the mountains are just so unique looking. They are green. They often have like terraced steps on them, which makes it very unique, and you typically won't see those mountains anywhere else besides maybe right outside in South Africa where it borders. But here, yes, another country that uses this little white car, and this is the only vehicle that you will see in this country. Agave plants are very common in Lesotho, sprinkled all about, and the architecture here is quite unique, I would say. We have this round stone building with this thatched roof. This is a type of building that you can see all over the country. Of course, you might see other ones as well, but look at all these thatched roofs right here. This is a building of Lesotho that is the most common. License plates here, I really wouldn't focus on too much because a lot of times they can just look white, but you might see some that have a blue text on it and they can appear blue, which is a very good thing for Lesotho. So I think this is a pretty straightforward country. Even in the flat bits that I'm in right now are typically not that flat. You will see some rolling hills, and you potentially will be able to see mountains in the distance. These flat areas, which are seen in the north part of the country, are used for agriculture. A lot of corn is used here. It seems like we're just in an empty field. But for the most part, most of this country is going to be this kind of breathtaking scenery with these jagged mountains that look honestly really cool. So that is all of Africa as seen through the lens of a Google Street View and for you guys as OpenGuessr players. I hope you learned something new and you can get some very, very good guesses in this continent. Make sure to leave a like if you learned something new. I really would appreciate it, and I hope you all enjoyed.